Came home from a 3-day nursing conference in Phoenix to find my husband laughing. Not the kind of laugh you share with someone you love. The kind of laugh that fills a room and makes everyone else in it feel like they belong. Everyone except the person standing at the front door with a rolling carry-on and tired feet, watching the whole thing from the outside. My sister-in-law was sitting at my kitchen table. Her 2 kids were running through my living room in their socks. My husband had his feet up on the chair. I always told him not to use like a footrest, and he was holding a beer at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, and he was laughing at something she had just said. I stood there for probably 15 seconds before anyone noticed me. My son was not in the room. I asked where he was before I even said hello. My husband looked at me with that expression he gets, like I had interrupted something important by walking into my own house. He said my son was in the garage. He said it like it was nothing. My son is 5 years old. The garage in November in Ohio is not heated. It sits at about 48 degrees on a good day. I dropped my bag right there in the entryway and went through the side door and found him sitting on the concrete floor next to my husband's tool bench, wrapped in a beach towel, the only thing he could reach off the rack, holding his toy fire truck against his chest. His lips were pale. His nose was running. He looked up at me with these enormous brown eyes and said, "Mommy, I was waiting for you." I picked him up and I did not go back inside for a long time. I stood in that cold garage holding my 5-year-old and I breathed. I just breathed. Because if I had walked back through that door in the first 60 seconds, I do not know what would have come out of my mouth. My husband and I had been married for 4 years. We got together fast, the way some people do when the circumstances line up and the timing feels right and you mistake comfort for love. He was funny and easy, and he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a while. I was 29, I had a good nursing job at St. Vincent's, and I thought that was enough of a foundation. My sister-in-law had been a complication from the beginning. She was his younger sister, and she had a way of being in our lives that I could never quite name. Not intrusive enough to confront, not distant enough to ignore. She had 2 kids from 2 different relationships, neither of which had lasted, and she had been between apartments since the previous spring. My husband suggested she stay with us in July, just for a month, maybe 6 weeks. It was now November. I had raised it with him twice. Both times he said I was being unsympathetic. Both times I backed down because I was tired of the fight going nowhere, and I had early shifts and I needed to sleep. I should not have backed down. That evening, after I got my son warmed up and fed and into bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with my husband and I asked him directly, why was our son in the garage in the cold while he was inside entertaining his sister and her children? He said my son had wanted to play out there. I said he is 5. He does not decide where he spends 4 hours alone in November. He said I was overreacting. I said his lips were pale when I found him. He said I always come home looking for a problem. I went to bed that night in the guest room, not because I was making a statement. Just because I could not be next to him and sleep at the same time, and I had a 6 a.m. shift. The next few weeks were a slow unraveling that I kept trying to reweave. I started paying closer attention to things I had let blur. My husband had not worked a full-time job in over a year. He had a freelance web design business that he insisted was picking up, but when I looked at our joint account, which I had not done carefully in months because I trusted him, because I was stupid, I saw the pattern clearly for the first time. Money was coming in from my paychecks and disappearing. Not all at once. 20 here, 80 there, 200, 350. Venmo transfers to a name I didn't recognize. Grocery runs that seemed too large for our household. A car insurance payment for a car I didn't recognize the last 4 digits of. I added it up over 3 months. The number I got was just over $14,000. I know that's not the kind of money people lose track of. But I was working 12-hour shifts 3 to 4 days a week and coming home to a house that needed managing and a kid who needed attention and a husband who was present in body but not in effort, and I had told myself that the money probably made sense if I understood the context. And I kept not looking for the context because I was afraid of what I would find. I found it. I was looking for the insurance card for my son's pediatrician appointment, and I went through the desk drawer in the office, my husband's space. I almost never went in there, and I found a receipt from a hotel downtown. February, when I had been on a 4-day trip to visit my mother. 1 room, 2 adults, charged to a credit card I didn't know he had. I sat with that receipt for a long time. Then I took a photo of it and put it back exactly where it was. I did not say anything that night, or the next night. I went to work, I came home, I fed my son, I helped with his bath and his books and his sleeping. I smiled at my husband across the dinner table, and I started quietly, carefully, doing what I should have done months earlier. I called an attorney. Her name doesn't matter here, but she was thorough and direct, and she didn't let me spiral. She told me what I needed to document, what I needed to stop doing, and what I absolutely could not do. She was very specific about that last one. Do not confront him. Do not confront him, sister. Do not tip your hand before we are ready. Whatever you're feeling right now, you keep it behind your face. I was very good at keeping things behind my face. 4 years of managing a difficult marriage had made me excellent at it. I opened my own checking account at a different bank. I had direct deposit changed to go there. I made a spreadsheet of every suspicious transaction I could document going back 14 months. I photographed the hotel receipt. I found 2 more credit cards he had opened in his name using our home address. I only found them because I started watching the mail. I contacted the credit card companies and confirmed the balances, combined just under $23,000 in debt he had accumulated without my knowledge. Not connected to our joint accounts, his name only, but borrowed against a lifestyle we shared. My attorney said that mattered for the divorce proceedings. She said a lot of things mattered. She told me to start documenting my sister-in-law's presence in the home and how it was affecting my son's living situation. I started keeping notes on my phone. Just timestamps and observations. The cold garage was in there. So was the Tuesday afternoon when she asked me if I had any room in my work schedule to pick up her kids from school because she had a thing. The thing turned out to be a nail appointment. My son had strep throat that week, and I had rearranged 2 shifts to care for him, and I drove 40 minutes round trip to collect 2 children who were not mine because my husband thought that was a reasonable request to pass along. I noted everything. I stopped reacting and started recording. My attorney filed the petition in December. My husband was served on a Wednesday morning. I know because I had made sure my son was already at my mother's house before it happened. I didn't want him there for whatever came next. What came next was worse than I had prepared for, and I had prepared for a lot. My husband did not respond with anger, at least not at first. He responded with charm, which was somehow harder to stand in front of. He called me that afternoon, calm and reasonable, and said he thought we could talk through this. He said he knew things had gotten complicated. He said he wanted to fix it. He used the word us 6 times in 11 minutes. I counted. I said I had an attorney and he should speak with her office, and I hung up. He came to the house that evening. His sister let him in. I had not yet been able to get her out, which was one of the things my attorney was working on because she had been there long enough that a formal notice was required in Ohio to remove someone from a residence. I stayed in my son's room with the door locked. I sat on his floor and read him 3 books, and I listened to my husband knock and then stop, and then talk to his sister in the kitchen in a low voice that I could not fully make out. My son fell asleep holding my hand. I stayed there a long time after. The situation in the house became untenable fast. My attorney said the process for the formal notice would take a few weeks and advised me to consider temporarily relocating with my son while it played out. I didn't want to do that. It was my house. My name was on the mortgage. I had made every payment. But my attorney reminded me that I needed to be strategic, not right. Those are not always the same thing. I moved to my mother's house with my son for 3 weeks. I didn't love it. My mother loves me and she is a lot to be around, and her house is small and my son missed his room. But it was warm and it was safe, and she made chicken soup and she didn't ask me too many questions, which is the most generous thing you can do for a person who is barely holding it together. My attorney sent the formal notice. My sister-in-law did not respond within the required period. The next step was a court filing, which we did. My husband, predictably, filed a response through his own attorney calling me hostile and unwilling to engage in good faith. His attorney sent a letter suggesting I had abandoned the marital home. My attorney sent a letter back that was 6 pages long. I didn't read the whole thing, but I understood its general tone. The credit card debt came up in the discovery process, so did the hotel. So did the Venmo transfers, which had gone to an account registered to a woman I had never heard of, not his sister, someone else. When my attorney laid it out in plain language, the picture was not complicated. My husband had been moving money, hiding debt, and conducting at least one affair, possibly more, for a sustained period of time while I worked 12-hour shifts and raised our son and kept the lights on. I sat with that for a long time, not because it surprised me, because I wanted to let myself feel the full weight of it before I put it somewhere manageable and moved forward. Then I put it somewhere manageable and moved forward. There was a moment, I think I need to tell this part, when his attorney requested an in-person meeting. Not a deposition, not a formal proceeding. A meeting. My attorney advised against it. She was clear and she was right. I went anyway. I know what my attorney said. I know what the sensible thing was. But I had been sensible for 4 months, and I needed to hear what he was going to say. I needed to hear his explanation come out of his mouth so that I would never, in a weak moment at 2 a.m., wonder if there was something I'd missed. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, public, mid-morning on a Thursday. He was already there when I arrived. He looked like himself, which bothered me more than if he had looked terrible. He was wearing the gray jacket I used to like. He ordered me a coffee without asking what I wanted, which was exactly the kind of small gesture that had made me fall for him and that I now understood as a need for control dressed up as consideration. He said he was sorry. I waited. He said things had gotten out of hand. He said the affair had ended. He said the debt was something he had planned to resolve before I found out. Like that was the part that was supposed to reassure me. He said his sister needed him and he hadn't known how to balance that. He said he loved our son. He said he still loved me. I waited until he was finished. Then I said, I have a copy of the hotel receipt, the credit card statements, and 6 months of Venmo records. My attorney has them too. I came here because I needed to hear you, and I have. I don't have any questions. I put down money for my coffee and I left. I recorded the conversation on my phone from the moment I walked in. My attorney had been very clear that I should not do this without informing the other party under Ohio's consent laws, and she was right and I should have listened, and I disclosed it immediately so it could not be used improperly. But for me personally, having that recording meant I would never misremember. I would never soften it over time. I would never let myself believe it was something smaller than what it was. His sister vacated the house 2 weeks after the court order. She left several items behind and took my son's bicycle by mistake, which I found out when he asked for it and I looked in the garage. I filed a report. I got the bicycle back. The divorce was finalized 7 months after I filed. Ohio is a no-fault state, but the dissipation of marital assets, the hidden credit cards, the documented financial misconduct was taken into account in the settlement. I kept the house. He was responsible for the credit card debt. I received a child support arrangement that my attorney described as appropriately structured. My husband's affair, it turned out, had been with a woman he met through a freelance project. She lived in Columbus. I don't know what happened between them after the divorce, and I don't need to. That chapter has nothing to do with my son's future or mine. The hardest part was not the legal process. The legal process was exhausting and expensive, and there were weeks when I cried in my car in the hospital parking garage before every single shift. But it was a process. It had steps. You did the next thing, and then the next thing, and eventually you got to the end. The hardest part was my son asking me, on a night when he couldn't sleep, why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. He was 5. He deserved a true answer. He could actually hold. I told him that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the family, and when that happens, the family finds a new shape. I told him that he was the most important person in my life, and that was never going to change, no matter what shape the family was. He thought about it for a while. Then he asked if we could get a dog. I said we would think about it. We got a dog 4 months later. A beagle mix from the county shelter named whatever my son decided to name him that morning, which was Truck. Truck sleeps at the foot of my son's bed and has eaten 2 throw pillows and part of a wooden spoon, and I would not trade him for anything. I went back to full-time at St. Vincent's. I picked up a weekend float position that paid better. I refinanced the house in my name only, and the payment is higher than it was before, but it is mine, and every month I make it, I feel something I can only describe as solid. I am not going to tell you I healed fast or that it was clean. I had a therapist I saw for 10 months. I have a good friend who let me call her at midnight 3 separate times and never made me feel like a burden. I have my mother, who is a lot, but who showed up every time. I am 33 now. My son is in 1st grade and he tells knock-knock jokes that don't make logical sense, but that he delivers with total confidence, and I laugh every single time. I think about the woman I was when I came through that front door and found my son alone in the garage in the cold. How she stood there for a full minute before she moved. How she didn't know yet what the next year was going to ask of her. I think she would be surprised. Not by how hard it got. She probably expected that. I think she would be surprised by how quiet the house is now. Not empty quiet, but the kind of quiet that means nothing is about to go wrong. I think she would be surprised by how much she sleeps. My son called from the other room last week. He wanted help with his Lego set, the one with the instructions he insists he doesn't need until he does. I went and sat on the floor next to him, and we built it piece by piece, and he explained every step to me like I was the one learning. I was a little. That is the shape we found. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet, practical way you start to see things when the noise is gone. My husband didn't become who he turned out to be overnight. Neither did I. The version of me who came through that front door and almost let it go, almost told myself the garage wasn't that cold, almost decided to sleep on it and bring it up later when the timing was better. That version of me had been practiced into existence by years of small surrenders. Every time I backed down from a fight I was right to have. Every time I checked the joint account and then closed the tab without looking too closely, I was teaching myself that peace in the short term was worth the cost I couldn't yet see. That is how damage compounds, quietly and with your own participation. What I know now is that integrity isn't a value you hold in theory. It shows up in the specific moments. It's the moment you photograph the hotel receipt and put it back exactly as you found it instead of confronting him in a way that feels good but costs you everything strategically. It's the moment you do not let what he did to you become the way you talk about his father to your son. Those moments are small and they are unglamorous, and nobody applauds them, but they are what you are actually made of. The clarity I found in those months didn't come from anger, even though I had plenty of it. It came from making myself think clearly in conditions that made clear thinking very hard. opening that separate bank account, building the spreadsheet, calling the attorney before I had fully decided what I was going to do, because doing the next right thing before you feel ready is almost always what getting out requires. That kind of thinking, the slow, careful, unsexy kind, is what actually moves your life forward, not the confrontation in the coffee shop, not the satisfaction of watching him be served. The spreadsheet at midnight, the conversation with the attorney, the 3 weeks at my mother's house when I did not want to be there. But I understood correctly that being strategic mattered more than being right. And then there is the part nobody talks about, which is that getting through something hard does not happen because you are tougher than other people. It happens because you decide over and over, on the ordinary days when nothing is dramatic and you are just tired, to keep going anyway. My son asked me a question I didn't know how to answer, and I answered it as honestly as I could. And then the next morning I packed his lunch and drove him to school and went to work. That is what endurance actually looks like. It is not cinematic. It is just the next thing done. What I want, if anyone is listening to this, is for you to trust what you already know. You don't need more evidence. You don't need it to get worse before you believe yourself. The cold garage was enough. The beach towel was enough. The moment you feel something and immediately start explaining to yourself why it's probably fine, that moment is the one worth paying attention to. My son names things with complete confidence. His dog is Truck. His explanation is always definitive even when it is slightly wrong. I am trying to be more like that. Less deferral. More, this is what I see and I trust it.